The new lightweight champion shocked the world when he finished the Bronx in Abu Dhabi, leaving everyone in awe of his greatness. Many fighters had picked Oliveira to get the job done, and Islam proved them wrong. The people in Islam's team, however, knew this would happen all along. How high is the ceiling for the Dagestani, and what do his peers think about him after his performance at 280? Let's find out. To start off, we'll look at what the Eagle had to say about his protege. It's been very well documented that Islam Makhachev and the former UFC lightweight champ Khabib Nurmagomedov grew up training together in a village in Dagestan. Khabib's father, Abdulmanap, was Makhachev's head coach and considered him to be one of his favorite students. The two trained together their whole lives and are like brothers, so the question of the two scrapping inside the cage was never raised. Although they've sparred together for more than 1,000 rounds, according to Islam, who wouldn't want to get their hands on some of that footage? Before his fight against Charles was even booked, Khabib was confident in Islam's ability to get the job done. He went on record to say that Islam would ride Charles like a horse and show him that if Sambo was easy, it would be called jiu-jitsu. Many people made fun of the UFC Hall of Famer for these comments, but he was right at the end after all. After Islam raised gold, Khabib said inside the cage that he believed Makhachev is the pound-for-pound best fighter on the planet, which is why they decided to call out the featherweight champ and pound-for-pound king Alexander Volkanovski. As confident as Khabib is in Islam's ability to hold the title for a long time, he wants his friend to defend the title 5 or 6 times within the next 2 or 3 years, and then think about hanging it up. Not to put a cap on his potential, it's just their philosophy of retiring on top. Speaking of Alex, let's see what he had to say about Islam. The featherweight champ had been gunning for an opportunity to fight for a second belt for almost a year now. Ever since the trilogy against Max Holloway finished, it seemed like there was no one at 145 who would present an interesting challenge for the undisputed king. Volk put his winning streak in jeopardy by flying out to Abu Dhabi and agreeing to be the backup for the UFC 280 main event. And when you make these kinds of efforts, they don't go unnoticed. After Islam got the belt, he called out Alex, and they wanted to book a fight in Volk's hometown in February. The featherweight king thinks that size won't be an issue for him. The Aussie used to be a professional rugby player and weighed around 220 pounds. Since then, even though he's lost weight, he still carries that big boy strength. Volk has always been pretty confident in his ability to create scrambles and get back up to his feet. In his words, those short legs are hard to keep down. On paper, his small frame might prove to be an advantage, but when dealing with a guy like Makhachev, you need to be in the absolute best condition. Alex has been getting rounds in with Gordon Ryan and some of the other best grapplers in the world, so he's prepared for the grueling pressure of the Dagestani. As for Islam's striking ability, he thinks a lot has been made about Makhachev being well-rounded, and he's looking to test that. The Aussie believes he's the faster guy and can keep the fight standing, so he'd have plenty of opportunities to test the striking ability of the new lightweight champ. Up next, Arman Tsarukyan believes Islam is on a different level. Apart from the one loss in his career, which was a flash knockout, the most competitive fight on Islam's record is his back-and-forth grappling clinic against a 24-year-old Arman Tsarukyan. It was Arman's UFC debut, and he had to face the future champ, and he put on a better fight than people expected. As of now, Tsarukyan sits inside the top 10 after going 5-1 since losing to Makhachev. His only loss was a close decision to Gamrot, which could have gone either way. When asked about the new champ, Arman said that Islam's on a different level compared to the rest of the division. His striking is so good, and his grappling is at an elite level that no one else can match. He's very confident that no one can dethrone the champ right now except for himself. The lightweight contender argues that he fought the man in his debut, and since then, he's grown a lot. He was the toughest fight Islam ever had, and if they faced off again, he'd make sure it goes in his favor this time. The two earned Fight of the Night when they fought many years ago, and many fans have been waiting to see the rematch since. Arman is about to take on a tough incomer Damir, and he plans on getting another win inside the top 5. After that, the UFC would have no other option but to make the rematch. Next up, Bobby Green talks about Islam's potential PED use. Perhaps the biggest criticism of Makhachev going into the title fight with Dubronk was the fact that in his 10-fight win streak leading up to the title shot, he hadn't beaten anyone who would be considered a top-tier fighter. The last win Islam had was in a short notice bout against Bobby Green. Makhachev finished the fight in the first round via TKO. Since then, Green has had some words to say about Islam, and they haven't always been the most positive. Most recently, in the pre-fight media appearance, Bobby talked about how strong Islam felt and how he thinks that rules are a little different in Russia when it comes to the use of banned substances. He thinks Islam and a lot of Russian athletes are taking PEDs, and that's the reason why they perform the way they perform. Green said, "Imagine if you've been taking steroids since you were 10. The UFC lightweight has been in trouble with substance abuse himself recently, and just just served a suspension by USADA. Earlier this year, Green went on Joe Rogan's podcast and talked about Khabib and Islam not being the greatest fighters because their fights are boring. According to him, a fighter should prioritize being entertaining before the result. Joe disagreed, but Green was very determined in his idea that fighters are great based on how much style they have. Certainly an interesting take from a former opponent. Next up, Sean O'Malley was impressed by Islam's last performance. On the same card as Islam was the Sugar Show, facing his toughest test in Peter Yan. Sean got the job done and is now the #1 contender, and he also got the chance to get a glimpse of the main event. In his podcast, O'Malley said that he saw the finishing sequence in which Charles threw a jumping knee and Islam dropped him, after which the Dagestani locked a head and arm choke and went into side control to finish the fight. Sugar's immediate reaction was that this guy is for real. He obviously thinks his grappling is on a different level, but his striking was also very effective. According to Sean, when your grappling is that high level, you don't have to be the best striker in the world, but Islam managed to drop Charles, so he's obviously pretty good. Sean, along with many fighters, picked Oliveira to get the job done solely because of the level of guys he had beaten lately. O'Malley thought the fight between Islam and Volk would be more exciting than any other fight at lightweight. It'll be a pretty interesting challenge as Volk is a pretty strong guy, and anyone can land a good shot. Up next, Anthony Smith and Michael Bisping talk about getting roasted for picking against Islam. Bisping and Smith have one of the best podcasts in MMA, and before every big card, they make their predictions. Coincidentally, they both picked Charles to get the finish over Islam, and the Russian fans weren't happy about it. The former UFC middleweight champ talked about all the abuse he's been getting since the fight took place. The Englishman explained that he doesn't have a bias against Islam. He only picked Charles because he thought Oliveira had been underestimated in the past, and it would be unfair to pick against the uncrowned champ at the time. Smith added by saying that there was no way for anyone to know that Islam was gonna dominate the way he did, because before Charles, he had never faced anyone at a high level. They thought Makhachev's performance was absolutely sensational, and a complete shutdown to the point that DuBronx didn't have anything to respond with. Smith thought that it was one of the best and most dominant performances in a UFC title fight. They acknowledged the fact that Khabib and his team had been saying it all along, that Islam is the best in the world, and many people believe that he might be even better than Khabib. Bisping thought it would be naive to think he's better than the Eagle, but with the way his striking and grappling looked, it was hard to see how anyone would take the belt away from him. And finally, Michael Chandler thinks Islam is better than what he gave him credit for. One of the top 5 lightweights and perhaps the nicest guy on the roster, Iron Mike, like many other fighters, predicted that Charles would win. So when he was asked about the fight after it had taken place, he had nothing but nice things to say about the champ. Chandler completely admitted that he was wrong about Islam and that he's as good as he claims to be. He also said that his performance was better than he thought it was gonna be, and he can't wait to compete against him one day with the title on the line. Dustin Poirier, who's coming off a win over Chandler, also gave the champ a lot of props. Makhachev had made fun of Poirier for having a black belt, despite getting choked out in 2 title fights. So the Diamond went on to finish Mike with a rear naked choke and said, "Who ain't got jiu-jitsu?" Dustin might be one win away from a shot at the lightweight gold one more time. And with all that, that's a wrap for this video. How long do you think the new champ would stay on top? And could he pass Khabib as the lightweight GOAT? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.